In 1914, Atterdag-College was built in what is now Solvang, California, under the leadership of Pastor Benedict Nordentoft. As the years went by, it was a college, folk school, a boarding house, winter school, a summer school, and a celebrated center of activities for the growing Danish community. Although the building no longer stands, the memories are still the root of not only Solvang, but of those who studied, worked, and lived at Atterdag.
I lived in this place. Well, no, there's a door that's gotten over there, so maybe I lived in this one. I can't. Let's just say I lived in the one right before the door.
Great. And do you remember looking out of the window?
Yes.
What did you see back then?
Well, we were always looking for people coming and going, you know. There wasn't very many cars then that came. And
so it was pretty quiet back then?
Well, where I lived, yes, it was. Except at night. There was always excitement on the porch. Any kind.
What kind of excitement?
Well, a boy meets girl, all that sort of stuff.
We carried our food with us in a suitcase because we weren't going to spend too much money on eating on the train. But we had to give up at last. The food wasn't fit to eat before we arrived in Solvang. And we landed in Gaviota after a very exciting trip for two girls who'd never been anywhere. And Eval Christensen met us there in his Studebaker. He always drove a Studebaker. And it was quite a reunion because he had not only been the pastor in our village in South Dakota, but we were very good personal friends with him too. So we drove over the old Nahui grade highway and came to Atterdag.
It was the church community, and it was the folk school tradition that we, well, that's why Atterdag was built, to become a folk school. Folk school in America, they would have winter sessions for new immigrants where they could learn the language, and also they would have Danish history, and they would have anything else that might help them in their new life in America. This would be for young immigrants. And what did we get out of it?
Well, Atterdag College was rather new. It had been built a couple of years or so, and it was really the Danish cultural center of the Solvang. And so we had many activities there. Well, they had the church there. And
people from all over the United States came and gave lectures and such. And at a very young age, I went to lectures. I was brought up on lectures, and I still find them interesting.
Almost anything that you can think of was held in the gymnasium up there, and it was always festively decorated, even though it was a basic gym with bars on the one wall and all. And my folks had their summer school, which was based very much on the idea of the Danish folk school. And so every summer for 6 weeks we had up to 125 children living up there. And that was always stressed that it was not camp, but it was a summer school. And my dad was very firm on that they were there to have a fun experience, but also it was a learning thing.
Someone had called, or we had inquired about some place to be out here, and the job at Atterdag was vacant at that time, and we could come out here and have a place to stay and manage Atterdag, which we did for 4.5 years. We did all the cleaning, took care of the gym hall. When Tarno came for his classes, we had to have it clean so the kids wouldn't get their white shorts dirty. And while we were there, all our meetings took place in our lecture hall, and the Sunday school met there Sunday mornings, and then they each went to their classes down in the basement. And Joanne, which is A.B.'s daughter, and our daughter Arlene, cleaned the rooms every week for a big pittance of about maybe 50 cents. I don't know.
So you were 14, you came from Minnesota?
I came with my brother. He was 2 years older than I was, and my sister was 1 year older. And then I was the youngest.
Mm-hmm.
And
you mean your family just shipped you out?
yes, they didn't tell us before. We had a chance to come to California and work and send our money home, because it was depression for everybody up there at the time.
Pastor Evil Christensen replaced Nordentoft as pastor and leader from 1921. Through the dark years of depression, he and his wife, Otelia, steered their changing flock with kindness and wisdom. It was from 1924 to 27 that Viggo Townall taught gymnastics, anatomy, and philosophy at Atterdag.
Atterdag College was built on a bluff above the mesa where we're now. And after the college, they built a gymnasium because Danish people were very anxious to have gym lessons. So happens my father was the first gymnasium teacher, and also my mother was the first music teacher.
Pastor Christensen was a wonderful man. He was so good with young people. He talked to us about everything. I remember I was concerned because I would read a book and then I couldn't, a week later I couldn't really remember what I had read. I could remember it if it was a textbook and we studied, but if it was just a book, it bothered me that I could sometimes forget. And I was talking with him about that. We talked to him about everything. And he said, well, Elna, can you remember what you had for dinner Tuesday 2 weeks ago? Of course I couldn't. And he said, well, it must have done you good anyway. And of course the idea was that what I had read must have done me some good anyway. But you could go to him with everything.
Well, we were a little homesick when winter came because we thought of our parents and our brothers and sisters at home having fun in the snow and all the things they were doing we longed for too. But then of course we had our fun too. And one thing we did was Christmas Day after the noon meal, Reverend Christensen would gather us all on the front steps for the yearly picture. And in the afternoon we went to the ocean so that those who came from the cold country could write home and say they had been swimming Christmas Day.
I have a real good picture of the valley before all the houses were built on the other side of Atterdag. Well, I have a picture of my mother and father when they were taking care of the Atterdag. I think they were there for 2 or 3 years. There was a room on the first floor. There was a basement, first floor and second floor. On the first floor, when you came in down toward the end, there was a room that all these old bachelors had their smoking room, played cards. I can remember that because you could cut it with a knife. But that was their entertainment, you know, up there. They enjoyed it, I guess.
But that was for guys only?
Yeah, well, no woman would want to be in there. This is when I folk danced for the prince and princesses.
think that we did a fairy tale, Hans Christian Andersen fairy tale, probably, and we must have been some little angels or something, who knows.
Is that you, one of them?
I'm one of them, yeah, but I can't remember what we did.
Which one are you?
I'm the one in the back, always in the back row.
It was very nice. We came to the valley to live in 1931, and my parents took care of a little 30-acre ranch out on Refugio Road, and that's where I grew up. But our whole social life centered around Atterdag. I don't think there was a Sunday night that we weren't at Atterdag for either a lecture or singing, or sometimes we put on plays, and then if we could talk somebody into playing the piano, we'd go over to the gym hall and dance for a little while.
And then we had craft classes, we had Danish hour every day, and singing, a whole hour of singing every day, and my dad would give a talk every day. So it was all, and we had gymnastics, of course, and folk dancing in the evening.
I learned those dances there.
I sure didn't. I didn't know any folk dancing until I came out here.
Yeah, so you learned it there.
Why, sure.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Those traditions were handed down. And particularly gymnastics, we learned.
Yeah.
A lot of gymnastics there. Not just floor, but even with the, what you call those things? The horse and the... Yeah.
And boy, they had to march to time and turn up. He said, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, så var der 1, 2, 3, 4.
He played a piccolo, that's how he kept us in line.
It was good.
Yeah.
It was good.
With the gym class, there was a lot of training there in focus, I think is probably the word. He wanted to try to teach young people to focus on what they were doing and involved in, and by focusing you gain the most. Also, when he said something once, then he expected that was all that was necessary, and had a lot of patience in some areas and very little in others. He had very little patience with bad behavior and disciplinary problems. He just felt that when you gave children a guideline, a fair guideline, and did not ask something of them that was not possible, then there was no excuse for bad behavior. And he was very very firm, but fair. Very firm, but very fair.
We had some little Danish song books. One was called, I'll translate, Syng dig glad, sing yourself happy. We sang when we walked. There was always a group of young people who had to have 10 or 15 minute walk before they went to bed, and that was because then we could walk and sing.
There was a lot of activities, and on the side hill towards Atterdag, Nordentoft had done a lot of landscaping of trails and things for hiking around there. And then we come down to the canyon, there would be picnic tables and a little bridge that went across the creek. And then across, as you take the little path across this creek, there would be a big tree. They called it the Tala, or the speaking oak. And this is where the gatherings would be, that a speaker could go up this tree from steps on the backside, and then he would face an audience where there'd be wooden benches out to the front of them, and there would be a lot of meetings and lecturing going on.
And singing.
Yeah. And singing, yes.
Oh yes, there was always something going on, classes and hikes and trips out to the ocean. We had picnics on days off.
Us girls really enjoyed coming up there when we were young and had their folk dancing and and anybody who could play anything would play for us. Alfred Madsen played the harmonica and we'd dance.
And at the time they were mostly black costumes with the red ribbons on and white blouses and a little black hat with embroidery or whatever and a little white apron. And the boys had their knickers that they hated, but they wore them, and knee socks and and the red nissahoo.
Well, it was a delightful place to grow up. The river had enough water, we could swim, we could fish. Adults kept their eyes on us. There was nothing that was bad. I hate to use the word. It was very nice living.
I remember one Christmas we were 60 in all, and we had to get extra tables put up in the dining room. And that was really fun when these people that we knew from the other years, they came home for Christmas. We were right there in the yard to greet them. There were some happy days.
It's a good, clean life. It really, really was.